All right, as we wait for more people to trickle in, I'll just go over some basic intro here. So, hello everybody, and welcome to Breaking Through FBDI Barriers, Streamlining Data Entry for Non-Technical Users. I am Stephanie, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Since this is a quick webinar, I'll just go over a few things as fast as possible before handing it over to our host, Andrew. So everyone today will receive the recording probably by tomorrow, by the end of the week, the latest. And after Andrew presents, we will begin our Q&A portion. During the session, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box down below or in the chat, and we will only answer them during the Q&A part just to allow everybody to hear everything that they need to hear and to hop off if needed. And this is actually our first session of the day for our End User Education Day. Andrew, if you want to hit the next slide, please. So there is still time to register for other sessions. If you can't make them, don't worry, because we will still send you the recordings, but I might be a little biased. I do think it's always best to join the live sessions, especially when it comes to the Q&A. So we still have, up next is our web ADI. Then we have another one in our finance module that's released to cloud. So please feel free to join. You can still register and you'll get the link to access it. And then also with us today is More for Apps' CEO, Brian Grossweiler. And before passing it off to Andrew, he would just like to say a few words. So, Brian.
Excellent. Thanks, Stephanie, and welcome everybody. Really excited to be here. As Stephanie mentioned, Brian Grossweiler, CEO of More for Apps, and really excited just to share not only this morning's content, but the content that we put together to bring whether training perspectives or thought leadership into other areas. And just to set the scene a little bit, we've recently just entered in our 25th year in business and really focused in with mission critical items on removing friction and data complexities within your ERP, but more importantly, leveraging our Oracle expertise and solving those data problems with Oracle EBS and Cloud Fusion. As Stephanie mentioned, first session today on breaking through FBDI barriers, streamlining data entry for non-technical users. I'm joined by the presenter, Andrew Gooch, product specialist in the UK. And Andrew, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Brian. Well, welcome, everybody. At some point, I'm going to turn my video off because I'm a little bit worried about the bandwidth, but I'll keep it on right at the beginning here. Yeah, welcome, everyone. So today's session is going to focus on FBDI and specifically the gaps in that solution when it comes to spreadsheet integration. And by that, I mean, what barriers does FBDI put in our way a little towards streamlined high-volume data entry? So yeah, nice to see you all. I'm Andrew Gooch, and I'll be doing most of the discussion today. Brian will dip in and out, I imagine, certainly towards the end. My background was originally technical. I was part of the development team that did our EBS products, and now I'm more one of the functional experts. Certainly with the cloud, I haven't done too much of the development there. I might just stop the video in case it gets in the way of anything, but I can put it back on when I'm answering questions later on. So this is actually the rough guide of what we'll be covering in the session today. So we're going to be focusing on spreadsheet loading, and that means really a lot of discussion around FBDI, what we use it for, what its limitations are. And then we'll start to think about what would work better for us, what an ideal world would look like in terms of spreadsheet loading. And that'll hopefully bring us naturally to our More for Apps solution, which is called the ERP Cloud Toolbox. And we'll also interrupt the session briefly at one point, quite early on, to get some feedback from the audience on your experiences with FBDI, just to get a gauge of what the feeling is about that tool in the community. And as Stephanie said, we'll have Q&A at the end. So yeah, maybe log your questions in the chat or say them towards the end, and that would make things run a little smoother. But let's get into it. So when we start our journey into the world of Oracle Cloud Fusion, we're sold a couple of ideas about data entry that really just aren't true. So we have the front-end data forms for general low-volume data entry. But with high volumes, the need for faster approach becomes obvious. And most of us will be told by Oracle or our IT partners not to fear, because Cloud Fusion comes with built-in spreadsheet loading tools. And in the main, what they're talking about is FBDI, and to a lesser extent, ADFDI. And today's talk is going to focus on FBDI because that one is the most comprehensive suite of solutions that Oracle provides. So ADFDI is more for niche areas. It's not ERP wide. So let's think about FBDI. Now, I imagine most of you will be familiar with it, at least to some extent. And on the face of it, it probably doesn't seem like a bad offering. Most of us will have had our first exposure to FBDI at migration time or during our go live. And limited to that use case, it performs pretty well. So we might not be quick to push back if it's suggested as our BAU spreadsheet loading tool. But actually, advocates of FBDI for BAU loading are kind of pulling wool over our eyes because it's not really suited to that scenario that well. So anyway, before we go any further, this is where we'll stop for a second and just get some feedback from the audience about what your experiences with FBDI are, whether there's any common problems or pain points you're facing. So I think Stephanie's brought that up. I can
Yeah,
see
I
it in
just
front of me. Yeah.
yeah, I just launched it. Yeah. There's a lot of
Was-
options, so you could go through and read them. We'll give you
was-
guys a little bit.
So they can click more than one, or is it just the
Yeah,
number
they can click
one?
more than one too.
Okay, yeah.
We'll give people another like 15 seconds.
Just here to learn. I'm glad to see that.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, it's typical. I can see already that there's a very low response for we don't have any problems with FBDI. And we've done
Okay,
some
good.
presentations over this
I'll end it.
subject matter fair bit.
Yeah,
And
so I'm just here to learn, which is great. And then too many spreadsheet files, and then the error reconciliation is a struggle.
yeah,
Great.
and a
Okay.
lot of the feedback I get too is to do with the fact that you don't get any feedback as you're doing the load. So it's difficult to know whether you're making mistakes until it's too late. Have you clicked on share results or do I just click that?
Oh, I did. Yeah, I took it
Okay.
away though. It's okay. That was the top answer. Here to learn, and then the error reconciliation or the multiple sheets, and then yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good feedback. It's certainly it's aligned to what we would expect. Right. Well, we're talking about FBDI, but maybe we'll take a little step back and think about spreadsheet loading in a general sense. At its basic level, spreadsheet loading is a pretty simple process. You take the data from the real world, you put it in a spreadsheet, and you load it all into Oracle from there, hopefully all at once. And that's it, job done. So it is tempting to think that if you have FBDI, your mass data loading needs are catered for. After all, Oracle's messaging frames it as a spreadsheet loading tool. But to do that, well, we say to do that would be a mistake. And why do we say that? Well, to answer that, we first need to consider what FBDI is. And there's a little bit of a clue in the name because it's file-based data integration. It's not desktop or spreadsheet integration in the real sense. So the FBDI approach is to fill a spreadsheet file with data and then to manipulate that file to fit an import process within the Oracle ERP. So the spreadsheet is only the repository for the raw data. And once the process is invoked, the procedure isn't spreadsheet based at all. Now, we'll go into that in a little bit of detail in a few seconds, but right now I just want to highlight some other aspects of FBDI. I can click on the right part. So to start with, and to Oracle's credit, there is an enormous amount of support with FBDI right across the ERP, and it's actually quite impressive from a functional perspective because practically any item of data can be populated via FBDI. So if you look here, this is SCM, and there's 102 FBDI templates listed there. I've scraped these off the Oracle support website. The ERP side, if we break it down for financials, I had 54. Hopefully that's accurate. It's very close if it's not perfect. And then on projects, about 32. And for procurement, we counted 15. So that's more than 200 across the board. So that is pretty comprehensive from a support side. But then looking at that, each of these templates is a standalone file. So there's a complex task involved in getting the data in the right shape and form to load a fully defined data element into the ERP. So if we take suppliers, for example, we can see that there are 8 or 9, including banking files that you need to fully enter a supplier fit for invoice processing. And the data in each of those needs to be carefully linked and coordinated to avoid problems during the load process. And then even those areas that don't require so many files, like the customer model, also place quite a heavy burden on the data entry team. So if we look at that one, for example, with this customer import spreadsheet, you've got 19 individual tabs of data to fill out there. And this is the main one, the party definition. And you lay out your customer party details here. But then you have to click through each tab and then lay out each sub-level of data, making sure you've linked it correctly with the parent record. So here with the party sites, that's done using the party original system reference value. And likewise with the customer account. But then on the account sites tab, you need to use the party site and the account references. So it's pretty fiddly. Make sure I've done the right number of clicks here. Yeah, I missed one, sorry. And then when you've finished with all of that, the final step within the spreadsheet is to generate the files that Oracle needs to receive. And over here on the first tab, there's a button for that, and you'll have a number of file dialogues to work through there. But that's not the end of the story. It's really just the beginning. And we'll come to that again in a minute or so. But for now, I just want to come back to this slide. So with FBDI, we think we know what it is, but maybe it's worth considering now what it isn't. So when we call something a solution, what we really mean is an end-to-end solution. And the front-end forms are a true solution by that definition because we enter our data there, we do our error reconciliation there, get our feedback there, make our changes and updates there, and then we move on to the next element. We never have to leave that environment to achieve our outcome. But then by that metric, FBDI is not really a spreadsheet solution at all. We enter our data there, but that's it. We don't do any more of the process in the spreadsheet. We have to step out of the spreadsheet and guide the FBDI loading process via a whole bunch of other steps in the Oracle front end, completely outside the spreadsheet. And those are not trivial steps, by the way. So this is the FBDI process flow, and it's pretty convoluted. This is the data entry bit in the spreadsheet. But then the whole of the loading, feedback, and error reconciliation process is done outside the spreadsheet. And then at the end of it, we don't even get feedback in the spreadsheet to let us know what happened. So we need to use the front end to figure out whether our data has been put into Oracle as we intended it. And then any corrections will need to be put back into the worksheet and we run the whole process again. So there are things to do in Excel, CSV conversions to do, import jobs to run in Oracle, and PDF error reports to reconcile. So now I've put together a short video recording which highlights this complexity. And we're going to watch that now. It's a typical scenario. So we'll be loading some detailed supplier data via FBDI, and I've sprinkled a few errors in so we can see all the process steps. And then we'll get some insight into how long that process will really take. So let's see that in action. So we've got 25 suppliers to upload with addresses and sites and so on. And that data is in a source document. So we need to transfer all that information across. And we use copy and paste for that. And as we watch that happening, we'll speed the clock up so we can get to the end a bit quicker. This data preparation process is time consuming in FBDI because our FBDI template layouts can't be altered to match the source document. So we have to copy data in column by column and then put in anything that's missing. And then click on the button to generate the import file FBDI needs. Okay, finished with the supplier headers, we now repeat the process for the other sections. So next up, the addresses template. And then the same thing again. Transfer the data across column by column. And so on and so on. Rinse and repeat. So if we skip to the end, we can see our data preparation stats. And altogether it took nearly 8 minutes to transfer that info into the FBDI sheets. And that's data we already had in digital format. No manual entry was needed. So it's quite a substantial chunk of time if you consider that. So now we're finished in the spreadsheet and we move to the front end to drive the actual data load. So we'll start the clock again. And again, we'll speed things up as we go in the interests of brevity. In here, we need to do a bit of navigation first up. We choose the file import and export option. Select upload and take the first of the zipped files we created in the FBDI spreadsheets. And then select supplier import against it. And now we need to go and schedule our processes to make use of that import. We need to search for the job, select it, and select the import process for this data set, suppliers first up. We choose our imported file and click on submit. And all the while that clock is ticking by.
Now that last step moved the data from the upload file to the interface table, but we're not there yet. We still need to import that interface data into Oracle proper. So we select import suppliers here and put in our input parameters and hit submit. And only now are we truly uploading anything into the supplier database table. So we need to monitor that job until it finishes and then look out for any errors. And when there is an error, we need to investigate it. So we open up that PDF error report. And looking in there, we'll need to take the appropriate steps in the spreadsheet to fix that issue. And then run all of those steps again. And that's just for the supplier header. So we have addresses and sites and all that other stuff to do too. So if we tally up the load time for all of those sections, this is what we get. Nearly 43 minutes just doing the load and reconciliation process. If we add that to the preparation time, we get the total time taken. And that's pretty significant, about 2 minutes per supplier.
So 2 minutes. Well, that's a win over data entry by the front end, but it's not really the performance we're after for high volumes. So you can already see that FBDI is not really the spreadsheet solution you might think it is, and still less the spreadsheet solution that we really want. To start with, there's not much support for data maintenance with FBDI. And with no built-in method to download existing Oracle data, any update functionality that is in there is very hard to leverage. The templates themselves are rigid, so the layout of columns is out of your control. There'll be columns that you want that are missing, columns that you don't need that you just have to put up with. And you can't reorder the columns to get them to make sense according to your source data or the task that you're doing. So it's pretty unpleasant experience-wise. But the main concern is that it doesn't allow an end user to simply do all their data uploads to Oracle from their spreadsheet. The data is populated there, but that's where it ends. There's no data validation in the spreadsheet, no ability to pick and choose, validated values, no feedback in the spreadsheet, and nothing to let the user know what's happened. The real engine is outside the spreadsheet in the Oracle front end, and that's an IT-centric process, not suited to end users. So with FBDI, you've placed an extra barrier between your end users and the data getting into Oracle, because you'll need a system expert to coordinate and run it. And then error reconciliation will be a back and forth between people with quite different skill sets. So how do we make things better? Well, let's consider this process flow again. What's the ideal process? What steps do we really need? Well, we need to put the data in the spreadsheet. That's a non-negotiable. We need to do an upload to Oracle, and we need to review our results. That's it, really. All those other steps we'd rather do without. They're just there because of the way that FBDI works. If we take them out, we get closer to what we're really after. A simplified process which removes the reliance on IT and system experts and leaves the end users with full control of their data. Spreadsheet loading should be simple, but like we say, not all spreadsheet solutions are equal. And if you're looking for one with a simple workflow like this, there's really only one that delivers. And that comes from More4Apps. Oh, I think I've gone the wrong direction. So what are we talking about here? Well, More4Apps' whole focus is providing solutions which enable end users to enter their data into Oracle from a spreadsheet without any of the hassles that we've been talking about. Fully functional spreadsheet solutions, feature-rich, and easy to use. We've seen FBDI, we've seen the shortcomings, and More4Apps hits them head on. So we offer a suite of tools called the ERP Cloud Toolbox, and it's a spreadsheet integration platform designed specifically for Oracle Cloud Fusion, striking the perfect balance between usability and power. It has 4 modules, each of them focused on a separate area of the ERP, and within each of those are a number of tools for the specific data entry requirements. And it has advanced features for creating and maintaining Oracle data with detailed error messaging and upfront validation. And there's a UX there which enables the data owners without reliance on IT experts or back-end processes. So it's positioned to deliver increased data accuracy and streamlined data entry. Now, before we go any further, it's probably best if I give you a quick walkthrough to help you picture what we're talking about here. And this is an example screenshot of the supplier integrator within the finance module. And you can see here that the product works as an Excel add-in. So you have dedicated controls for uploading and downloading in the worksheet. And it's designed to give maximum visibility of your data at one time. So the whole of the data hierarchy is in the one sheet. Header information, sub-level sections like attachments in this screenshot, and there are more sections over to the right, like addresses and contacts and so on. And because they're all together on the one tab, there's less scope to miss elements out because you can scroll across and inspect everything. So the download feature is worth emphasizing. You can directly source the sheet with data from Oracle, and that's super useful for updates or any data replication tasks that you might want to perform. Edit forms allow you to inspect multiple values at the same time, and the Oracle validation lists and so on are there for you to ensure a clean data set. You can see the type control is highlighted red here because there's an invalid value. You get feedback directly in row for your uploads. Errors are clearly marked and generally indicate which field needs the correction, much like we saw in the edit form a second ago. And your layouts are flexible. The tool uses the column headings up in row 9 there to identify the purpose of each column. And that means you're free to move columns around as you see fit to give you the most agreeable working environment. And columns can also be removed if you're not using them without ever impacting their uploads. So you can design a worksheet that absolutely fits your process without any unnecessary guff. And then the upload process is invoked by the button up there. And there are no steps to perform from outside the spreadsheet. So we're going to show it to you in action now. So we've got a few resources available that allow you to step through some typical scenarios yourself. And we're going to make use of those. And at the end of the session, we'll make them available to you. So we'll jump in. I've just got to switch across to my browser. And I'll maximize that. Hopefully that can be seen. Let me know if you can't see that, Stephanie.
All good.
Right. So basically there's two fundamental scenarios for data loading with Oracle: new data and existing data. So we'll start with the first of those two scenarios, and we're going to walk through a typical scenario where you've got a bulk of information that needs to be onboarded. So here we're going to do 25 suppliers and related sub-information, address and site and so on. And if we click through the presentation, we'll see how easy that is to do. So in this instance, and it's quite typical, we've been passed a spreadsheet file with a bunch of information outlining the details that we need to use as a basis to load our new supplier information. So it's in digital format already, so we can copy that and put it into our toolbox file and make use of it. So we'll just start by clicking and doing a drag, and we'll copy it to the clipboard. And once that's done, we'll just pass back over to our ERP Cloud Toolbox template. This is the supplier sheet. Now we've got that information in its format, but it may not match what we've got in our template. So we can make our template adapt to fit the source data. So perhaps there's columns that we don't want. We can remove those at any time. So we can do that. This is a visual representation. You would do this using the Excel cut columns format, and we can also reorder in the same way. So once we're happy with that, our data will be now adapted to match the format that our source document has. And then we just paste it in. We've got it in the clipboard already, so let's just paste that in. And when that drops in, we're ready to load. Really simple to do. So up in the toolbox, we've got what is clearly an obvious button to press, upload. We can also click on validate, and they'll run a pass to see whether that data is shipshape. But that happens as part of the load anyway, so we don't need to do that individually unless we have particular suspicions. And if I click on that, it'll open up a dialog. I can choose the whole sheet, which is what I'm going to do, or I could have also just had a subsection selected with the cursor, and we could have run those. And that load has happened. It's quite quick, and we've got our feedback now from Oracle's load. So we have a lot of green. That means those things have loaded, and there's one that's come back with an error. And that information is presented to us on the sheet really clearly next to the data itself. So we can see a highlighted red field there telling us that that value doesn't correspond to what Oracle will accept. So we can do a correction. We'll start off with doing a simple correction here in the sheet. It's just a spelling mistake, and we can see above it that there's the correct spelling. So we'll just use that value. We'll just copy that one down, and then we just reprocess the record. So we'll just click on that button again. This time we'll do the selection just where the cursor is. We could do the whole row again, and it would skip anything that's already loaded, but it's quicker just to do it that way. And that's it. Really, really simple. You can see that the end user, the data owner, was able to do the whole process themselves. They would never had to leave Excel. They didn't have to get in touch with any experts, and really was as simple a process as you'd expect and desire from a spreadsheet loading tool. So the other main scenario is data maintenance, right? We've got information in Oracle. We want to make changes to it. So let's watch that. It's a similar scenario, but we want to take what's in Oracle and make a change. So let's take a bunch of suppliers that we need to make a change to. In a normal situation, someone will identify which areas of data need to be changed. Here's a list of suppliers, and they all need to have their site terms changed. So we'll just copy that directly from the email that we've received and put those supplier names into our tool. We'll just put it in the supplier name column, paste it down. And you can already see here that the sheet has been really limited. We talked about flexibility of layouts, and I've really taken away all the distracting columns from this sheet just to really get to the crux of the matter without the distractions of columns we're not using. So I'll paste that list of supplier names in, and then we can use the download to go to Oracle and pull back the status quo, the data that's in Oracle now. We want to see what that is, and then we'll make the changes to it. So that just draws that information out of Oracle, and you can see that the existing terms have come through. So we could make a change. We could type that in if we knew the exact value, but let's imagine we're not exactly sure what that value is. So that's when we might use the edit forms to make sure we get the spelling perfect so we don't have any validation problems. So I'll just click on that data forms button. It'll bring up the form, and you can see that there's a control for whatever columns are in the sheet. And I'll just click on the terms, and we can select any value from there. I'll just choose that one. That was the one that was in the email, and that gets returned into the sheet. So we've done it for the one supplier site. Now we want to replicate that down. Well, that's where Excel really helps us out. So we'll just drag that down. We'll pull our cursor over that data and copy it down. And Excel makes it so easy. And then we're ready to do an upload. So I have a default value of update in that section, and that will just populate in the sheet, send that instruction to Oracle, and all that loaded. How easy was that? Really, no need to get outside of the spreadsheet. Everything really right in front of the person who knows that their business the best. So when you see it that way, it's really easy to understand what we're saying when we say not all spreadsheets are created equal. If we put FBDI and MorphWraps up against each other, it's pretty clear that the cloud toolbox, the ERP cloud toolbox for MorphWraps is the superior tool, not only for simplicity of use, but also with those added features like the download and that upfront validation that we saw. And that's the end of the prescribed content for today. So we have time for Q&A, and we'll bring in Brian and Stephanie for this, but I'll be answering most of the questions, I think. So I'll turn the video in a second. If I can't answer the questions, I'll take a note of them. Normally I can, but if there's anything particularly specific to technical people, I'll pass them internally and make sure that you get your answer.
Yeah, so we will do Q&A for next like 10, 15 minutes. I already have some questions for you, Andrew. If you initially ask a question and have any like further clarifying questions, please raise your hand and I can unmute you. Sometimes it's just easier that way. I'm going to try to get through the ones that we already have. And then if you run out of time, like Andrew said, we'll take them to the side. But especially those who are like just here to learn. If you do have any specific questions, like now's a great time. But I have some that are pretty not technical. But can you share any success stories from organizations switching from FBDI to more fraps? I can think of one in particular because we just did a session, but I don't know if you want to share light, if you have any good
Um,
stories.
I don't
I'm
have
thinking
any.
of EF
Yeah,
education
maybe that's
first.
more for Brian. And I don't have any specific things canned ready to describe there. Brian, did you have any input on that?
Yeah, I think just in general, when we think about customers that, there's really two different types of customers. Customers that have come from EBS and migrated to cloud, and customers that are new to Oracle in general. But the common theme that we hear from our prospective customers is exactly what this presentation is about. Told that we have a spreadsheet, get all the way through the implementation, and then the users get stuck, right? And so empowering the users at a high level, put more onerous data ownership on them, but put the tasks and the responsibilities on the particular users that are set to do the mission critical tasks as we've explained. And so generally speaking, I think that there's really not a lot of difference between what Andrew showed from the gaps of today's presentation to the more ideal state of removing those steps. And I think, as someone even mentioned, even in the chat, though, one of the biggest wins that customers find is really seeing those error messages identified in the row themselves. That's a really, really big difference in the success that these users have and the customers have without getting tripped up for the day. So easily identifiable, and then they can move on with the particular task. And that seems to be a pretty common theme across the user base.
Okay, cool. We
Yeah,
have quite a few
just to
more
add to
too.
that, sorry, to interrupt. We do hear a lot of talk about how the FBDI is a really great tool for populating, but it doesn't really stand for updates because you can't get the information in the spreadsheet to make your manipulations and your changes. So the updates and that validation are the 2 points that we hear the most often.
Okay, we have a couple questions. I think some you can answer quickly. Is there a new version of our current Morph apps? How can we obtain it? Just asking our IT that you should be able to go to the community, which we could talk about and download. So we can answer that
Yeah.
and reach back out to you and make sure that your account manager helps you with that.
Yeah, I'll bring up a slide in a second that shows you how to get to the community. There's a great resource set for that sort of thing. And if you want, you can also within the tool you can bring up the version and just send it to your sales rep and say, we're using this version, is that the latest?
Mhm. And then how can we handle any transformations to be performed in the source data?
Well, that's a kind of an ambiguous question, but I assume they're talking about the layouts of the data. Well, the source data will presumably be fairly inflexible, and that's what we've tried to adapt our solution so that your spreadsheet can adapt to your source data. So we saw all that stuff with moving columns around and removing them. So that's the whole point of that. So if you've got a bit of information that's coming from the bank or something in a format that you can't have any influence over, you can create templates within your worksheet that match that. So you don't have to do any of those steps, column by column, which we saw in the FBDI video, where it's actually quite difficult to transfer your information into the spreadsheet if you don't have that flexibility. So that's really what we're trying to provide there.
And then the follow-up question for that is, do you have the list of conversion objects for this ERP toolbox? I'm not sure what that means. Siba, if you want to
Yeah,
clarify that, you can, and we can help.
yeah, I'm not too sure exactly that. We have a list of the products that we support. So within on our website, like for example, if you broke down the finance module, you'll see suppliers, customers, fixed assets, so on. But I wouldn't want to, off the top of my head, list them all. There's
Yeah.
quite a lot. And we're building that list out day to day. Like we're about to make a new release in December in AR, for example.
And okay, I have another one for you. What are the main use cases for this when not used as an initial data upload?
Well, if it's not being used to populate the system and you're talking about BAU maintenance, it's more like that second scenario we showed you in the walkthrough. So you would typically use it either to bring down your Oracle information that you have and to see, what's wrong and make your changes and then re-upload it. That's the typical scenario where you're responding to changes in the real world and you need to make Oracle reflect that. So you'll be bringing information in with those download features, looking at what's there, looking at what's missing, and making your populations. And it's much easier to visualize that in a spreadsheet than it would be in the front end because everything's hidden in the front end as you have to drill down the navigation. The spreadsheets actually make that really good. You can download a bunch of suppliers, for example, and move over and look at their addresses and see where their address is missing, where there are fields missing, postcodes missing, things like that.
I said thank you. For teams already using FBDI, how easy is it to transition to more for apps? Like, what does the implementation process look like?
Well, it's as easy as pie, really. So obviously you need to install the product. There's a little bit, it's not really an installation. You put it on your desktop and then it's like it said, it was an Excel add-in. So there's a little front end on the PC to do. The rest of it's config on the ERP and there's pretty good instructions. So that's a very short amount of time, maybe an hour maximum, to make sure that the users have the responsibilities appropriate to the web services, which do the loads or the downloads. But then it's really just a case of opening up that worksheet and looking at the columns, figuring out which ones you need, maybe downloading an existing element of data that has everything, the master set, removing all the columns that you're not using, maybe reposition them, especially if you've got a source document you might be using, and then you're ready to go. Really, the buttons will work as soon as you click on them, so you can fill the information into the worksheet, much like you might have done with FBDI, but then you just put it into our sheet, click on those buttons, and all the processes happening within the spreadsheet. So it just takes away all of that back end.
Okay, great. Is more for apps like secure? How can you ensure like compliance with data?
Well, it is secure because we don't have any back office entrance to ERP Cloud Fusion. So we are calling Oracle supported public web services, essentially APIs, and you have to call them with your login details. So you log in, you didn't see it in the illustration, but you log in like you would if you were in the browser, and then you choose your templates, say suppliers. And when you go to do a load or when you go to do a download, it'll call that web service. And that's an Oracle public service, which in the back end will check that that service is available to that user. So you have to have the right role and a responsibility that's the terminology in EBS. You have to have that role granted, otherwise it'll just reject the call.
Right. Can you add columns and create formulas off of the entered data from a source?
Yeah, yes, you can. Like, so you're using Excel. So anything that you can do in Excel, you can do in our tools. So yeah, you can certainly add a column. You can add a column that's not even used for data if you like. You want to have a comment column for your own teams. They'll just be ignored by the tool if they don't have a column heading that corresponds to an Oracle control. And yeah, you can just use Excel like you could. You don't even need to have a defined spreadsheet for our tool. You could just open up a new sheet within another file, and you've got the add-in. So you just use the formatted sheet, and the rest of the Excel you can use happily without even corresponding to the more apps functionality. But yeah, formulas, lookups, all of that stuff is available to you. Copy and paste, obviously.
Yeah, she says thank you. I do have one more question, but if anyone has any other questions, please fill them in there. I think this one kind of relates to what we're going to talk about at the end. It's kind of more about like the support that More for Apps provides to use the tool and get started. And I think we're going to talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, maybe I'll open up that slide while you're asking it so we can see it.
We do have another one.
Yeah, I'll come back if we need to, but you might as well have that up. Yeah.
Yeah. Does More for Apps handle single sign-on, and how secure is the login credentials?
It does handle single sign-on. It's as secure as it would be if you're going through your browser. It's using the exact same mechanics. So you get your browser is granted with a session ID on the Oracle side, and it's the same with us. And all of that stuff is governed by your roles, your user, your password, all of that.
Okay, great. So I think, well, this question kind of ties into this. It is, yeah, the what ongoing support does More for Apps provide to help users with the tool? And Brian, I don't know if you want to talk about the community a little bit. It also
Sure.
relates to our previous question about getting the most up-to-date version.
Yep, happy to. So more recently here in the middle of this calendar year, we implemented and made available a More for Apps community platform. And within this community, it not only provides a ton of different resources available to everybody and anybody that's a customer of More for Apps, but has open discussion forums where you can connect with other users, post questions. As Stephanie and Andrew have already mentioned, you can, of course, download the latest release and find updated versions within the software that you're using today. But then also from a support perspective, yes, we have real live support agents that are across the globe, and you can go through that traditional model. Or you can also very quickly potentially search an error that you may get occasionally within the product and come to the support community or come to the customer community and very quickly see an article or a knowledge base that guides you and helps you very quickly fix that. So we're really excited, obviously, about creating this platform and get an opportunity to ultimately, again, remove that friction and make the lives of our users and our customers easier in building content within the More for Apps products.
Okay, great. Well, I don't have any other questions that I see. If you do have any more, you can feel free to email us and we'll take it offline. Not a big deal, but just to reiterate, we will send the recording and the presentation by tomorrow, by the end of the week. But I just want to say thank you. And I know Brian and Andrew probably will have some parting words as well.
Well, you go first, Brian.
Not much else to say. We appreciate everyone's participation. Great questions, great content, Andrew and Stephanie, and looking forward to seeing for those on the other sessions this afternoon.
Brilliant. Yeah. So I just thought I'd bring up this. So that's my email address there. So if you have any questions, you can go through Stephanie, but if you take a note of that, I'm happy to answer them as well. Yeah. Thanks for your time. I hope it was worthwhile.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys. Have a good one.